Hey there, YouTube! Before I get in the video, let me remind you, if you like my content, please hit that like and subscribe button, and also if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I do all this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more of this content to you more often. Alright, so, just a heads up, this is a new camera, so if some things look stranger than others, I am working on it. We're going to take a look at a deck tech for Magus Lucea Kane, which was part of the Tyranid deck tech. Specifically, she was the co-commander. So there was a Hive Lord, I believe, that was the original commander for the deck. I wanted to make a deck that was Tyranid at heart, but still kind of an interesting X spells type thing as well. So this is where we've gone with it. So let's take a look at the commander. Alright, our commander is Magus Lucea Kane. For 1, a green, a blue, and a red. She's got Spiritual Leader at the beginning of combat on your turn. You get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. She's got Psychic Stimulus. You can tap her to add 2 colorless mana. When you next cast a spell with X in its mana cost, or activate an ability with X in its activation cost, this turn, copy that spell or ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So essentially, we want to bog down the board with X spell creatures and just get extra value off of X spells. The beauty of that is that you don't have to dump a huge amount of mana into either of them, because the copies help you get double the value out of it. So that is kind of a strategy in here. We are going to take a look at the creatures next. Alright. Starting with the Aberrant. Aberrant is a X and 1 and a green for a 0/0, Ravenous. Trample, Heavy Power Hammer. Whenever Aberrant deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. Ravenous says that if it enters the battlefield with... Or, I'm sorry, if you paid 5 or more for it... Oh, no, it is enters the battlefield. If it enters the battlefield with 5 or more +1/+1 counters, you get to draw a card. Next up, we have Altered Ego. For X, 2, a green, and a blue, Altered Ego can't be countered, and you may have Altered Ego enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it enters with an X additional +1/+1 counters on it. We've got Animar, Soul of Elements. For 1 blue, 1 red, 1 green, it has protection from white and black, and whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Animar, Soul of Elements. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each +1/+1 counter on Animar. That 1 less will also help pay for X spells. We got Biophagus. For 1 and a green, it's a 1/3. Genomic Enhancement. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color. If this mana was spent to cast a creature spell, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. We got Broodlord, Ravenous, Blood Telepathy. When Broodlord enters the battlefield, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of other target creatures you control. It is a 3/3. We got Chisei, Heart of Oceans. For 2 and 2 blue, it's a 4/4 with flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Chisei, Heart of Oceans, unless you remove unless you remove a counter from a permanent you control. Just to keep on the same page here, this is in here for the Saga that's also in here. We got Clamavus, 4 and a green, it's a 3/3, it has Proclamator Hailer. Each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on it. We got Exocrine, for X, 2 and a red. It is a 2/2 with Ravenous, has Bioplasmic Barrage. When Exocrine enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to each player and each other creature. We got Hormigaunt Horde. It has Ravenous, it's a 1/1. Endless Swarm. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2 and a green. If you do, return Hormigaunt Horde from your graveyard to your hand. Got Hydroid Crassus for X, a green, and a blue. This is 0/0. When you cast the spell, you gain a half X life and draw half X cards, rounded down each time, and it has Flying, Trample, and enters the battlefield with X+1/+ encounters on it. We've got Incubation Druid for 1 and a green. It's a 0/2. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. If Incubation Druid has a +1/+ encounter on it, add 3 of that mana instead. You can pay 3 and 2 green to adapt for 3, which basically just gives it 3 +1/+ encounters. I think you can only do that the one time, though. If the creature has no +1/+ encounters on it, you can put 3 +1/+ encounters on it. We got Kodama of the West Tree for 2 and a green. It's a 3/3 with reach. It says modified creatures you control have trample. Modified is anything that has an equipment, aura, or a +1/+ counter on it. Or actually any kind of counter on it, now that I read it. Whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to search the library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We got Moloch for X, a red and green. Has Ravenous, Terror from the Deep. When Moloch enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. We got Nexos for 1 and a green. It's 2/2. It has Strategic Coordinator. Basic lands you control have tap to add 2 colorless. You can only spend that mana on cards that have, or costs that have X in it. We got Primordial Hydra for X and 2 green. It is 0/0. Primordial Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+ encounters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, double the number of +1/+ encounters on Primordial Hydra. Primordial Hydra has trample as long as it has 10 or more +1/+ encounters on it. We've got Ravener for X, a green and a blue. It has Flash. It's a 0/0. It's got Ravenous. And when Ravener enters the battlefield, target creature attacks target opponent this turn if able. We got Roshin the Meanderer for 3 and a hybrid red-green. It is a 4/4. You can tap to add 4 colorless mana to your mana pool, and you can only spend that to activate, or to only on cost of X spells. We got Shivan Devastator for X and a red. It's a 0/0 with haste and flying. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+ encounters on it. We got Sporocyst for double X and a green. It has Ravenous and Defender. It has Spore Chimney. When Sporocyst enters the battlefield, search your library for up to X basic lands. Then put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. We have Steelbane Hydra. Steelbane Hydra. X and 2 green is a 0/0. When it enters the battlefield, you get X +1/+ encounters. You can pay 2 and a green to remove a +1/+ encounter from Steelbane Hydra to destroy target artifact or enchantment. We've got Stonecoil Serpent for X. It's a 0/0. It has reach, trample, and protection from multicolored. Stonecoil Serpent enters the battlefield with X +1/+ encounters on it. We've got Termagant Swarm for X and a green. It's a 0/0 with Ravenous. It has Death Frenzy. When Termagant Swarm dies, create a 1/1 green Tyranid creature token equal to Termagant Swarm's power. We've got Tervagon for X, a 1 and a green. It has Ravenous. It has Trample. It has Spawn Termagants. Whenever Tervagon deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green Tyranid creature tokens. We've got Tyrant Guard for X, 2 and a green. It's a 3/3 with Ravenous. It has Shield Wall. Sacrifice Tyrant Guard. Creatures you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. We got Voracious Hydra for X and 2 green. It's a 0/1 with Trample. Voracious Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+ encounters on it. When it enters the battlefield, you get to choose either to double the number of +1/+ encounters on it, or to have it fight a creature you don't control. We've got Winged Hive Tyrant. 3, a blue, and a red. It is a 4/4 with flying and haste. It has Will of the Hive Mind. Other creatures you control with counters on them have flying and haste. And I believe last but not least, we have Zoanthrope for X, a blue and a red. It has it's a 0/0. It has Ravenous, has Flying and Ward 2, and has Warp Blast. When Zoanthrope enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to any target. Alright, next up we're going to take a look at instants. Starting with Beast Within, for 2 and a green, you destroy a permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 Beast creature token. We got Blue Sun's Zenith. For X and 3 blue, target player draws X cards and then shuffle Blue Sun Zenith into its owner's library. We got Comet Storm. For X and 2 red, it has multi-kicker 1. Choose any target, then choose another target for each time the spell was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them. And multi-kicker just means you can pay that cost multiple times. Got Heroic Intervention for 1 and a green. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. We got Inspiring Call for 2 and a green. Draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. We have Clouth's Will for X, 2 red and a green. You choose one, but if you control your commander, when you cast the spell, you may choose both. Breathe Flame, Clouth's Will, deals X damage to each creature without flying. Smash Relics, destroy up to X target artifacts and or enchantments. We got March of Swirling Mists for X and a blue as an additional cost to cast the spell. You may exile any number of blue cards from your hand. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way. Up to X target creatures phase out. We got Starstorm. For X and 2 red, Starstorm deals X damage to each creature. You can cycle it for 3. And then I believe lastly we have Thassa's Intervention for X and 2 blue. You can choose one. You can either look at the top X cards of your library, put up to 2 cards into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any random order, or counter target spell unless its controller pays twice X. Right, next up is sorceries. Starting off with Animist's Awakening. For X and a green, reveal the top X cards of your library, put all land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you have Spell Mastery, sorry, it's explaining what Spell Mastery is. If there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, untap those lands. Blue Sun's Twilight. X and 2 blue, gain control of target creature with mana value X or less. If X is 5 or more, create a token that's a copy of that creature. We got Crackle with Power for 3 X and 2 red. Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. We got Cultivate for 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand. Then shuffle. We got Curse of the Swine for X and 2 blue. Exile X target creatures. For each creature exiled this way, its controller puts a 2/2 green boar creature token onto the battlefield. We got Farseek for 1 and a green. You can search your library for a Plains, Island, Swamp, or Mountain card. Put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. We got Green Sun's Twilight for X and a green. Reveal the top X +1 cards from your library. Choose a creature card and or land card from among them. Put those cards into your hand and the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is 5 or more, instead put the chosen cards onto the battlefield or into your hand and the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. We have Hull Breach for red and green. Choose one, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or destroy target artifact and target enchantment. We have Jaya's Immolating Inferno for X and 2 red. You cannot cast this unless you have a legendary creature, unless you control a legendary creature or planeswalker, and Jaya's Immolating Inferno deals X damage to each of up to 3 targets. Got Nature's Lure for 1 and a green. Search your library for a force card, put that card onto the battlefield, and shuffle. We got Rampant Growth for 1 and a green. Search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. We got Reap the Past for X, a red and a green. Return X cards at random from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Reap the Past. Next up we have Artifacts. Starting with Arcane Signet, for 2, you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color of your commander's color identity. We have Astral Cornucopia for 3X. Astral Cornucopia enters the battlefield with X charge counters on it. You can tap to choose a color and add 1 mana of that color for each charge counter on Astral Cornucopia. We got Elementalist Palette for 3. Whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, put 2 charge counters on Elementalist Palette. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color, or you can tap to add colorless for each charge counter on Elemental's palette, but you can only spend that on cards with X in their mana cost. We got Lightning Greaves for 2. You can equip it for 0, and equipped creature has haste and shroud. We got Power Conduit for 2. You can tap it to remove counter from a permanent you control. You can choose 1 to put a charge counter on target artifact you control, or to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And again, this is used for Saga that you'll see later. We got Soul Ring. It costs 1. You can tap it for 2. We've got Great Henge for 7 and 2 green. The spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. You can tap it to add 2 green and gain 2 life. And whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. We have the Ozolith for 1. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. And then finally we have Twinning Staff. If you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead copy it that many times plus an additional time, you may choose new targets for the additional copy. You can also pay 7 and tap it to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Okay, next up we have enchantments. Starting with All Will Be One for 3 and 2 red. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. Garruk's Uprising costs 2 and a green. When Garruk's Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creatures you control have trample, and whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Got Hardened Scales for 1 green. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put onto a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on instead. Got Rhythm of the Wild for 1, a red and green. Creatures you control can't be countered. Non-token creatures you control have Riot, which means when they enter the battlefield, you can either choose to give them haste or a +1/+1 counter. We have Shadow in the Warp for 1, a red and a green. The first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast, and whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, Shadow in the Warp deals 2 damage to that player. We got the first Tyrannic War for 2, a green, a blue, and a red. The first chapter says you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield if its mana cost contains X. It enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of lands you control. For Chapter 2, double the number of each kind of counter on target creature you control, and Chapter 3 is the same. You use Chisei and Power Conduit to keep repeating Chapter 1. Next up we have Unbound Flourishing. Actually, last up we have Unbound Flourishing for 2 and a green. Whenever you cast a permanent spell with a mana cost that contains X, double value of X, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell or activate an ability, if that spell's mana cost or that activated ability costs contain X, copy that spell or ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. Next up we have Planeswalkers. We have Kiora, Behemoth Beckoner for 2 and a hybrid blue-green. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. For -1, you can untap target permanent. It enters with 7 loyalty counters. Next up, we're going to take a look at non-basic lands, starting with Breeding Pool, Shockland for blue-green, Cinderglade, which is a check land for red-green, with land types, same with the Breeding Pool has land types. Command Tower, you can tap it to add 1 mana of your commander's color identity. Exotic Orchard taps for any color that an opponent's land can tap for. Frontier Bivouac enters the battlefield tapped, taps for green, blue, and red. We've got Kessig Wolf Run, you can tap it for colorless, or you can tap X, a red and a green, tap it, and target creature gets +X/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. We've got Ketria Triome, enters the battlefield tapped, taps for green, blue, red, can cycle for 3, and has basic land typings. We got Misty Rainforest, the fetch land for blue-green. We got Path of Ancestry, enters tapped. You can tap it to add mana of any color, and if you tap it to cast a spell, or sorry, cast a creature that shares a type with your commander, you get to scry for 1. We got Rejuvenating Springs is the crowd land for blue-green. We got Reliquary Tower. You no longer have a maximum hand size, and you can tap it for colorless. We got Rockfall Vale, which is a check land for red-green. We got Scalding Tarn, which is a fetch land for blue-red. We got Spire Garden, which is a crowd land for red-green. We got Steam Vents, which is a shock land for blue-red and has basic land typings. We got Stomping Ground, which is a shock land for red-green and has basic land typings. We got Training Center, which is a crowd land for blue-red. We got Wooded Foothills, which is a fetch land for red-green. And we got Yavimaya Coast, which is a pain land for blue-green and can be tapped for colorless. And then finally, we have lands, basic lands. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 forests. 1, 2, 3 islands, and 1, 2, 3, 4 mountains. So that is the Magus Lucea Kane deck. The whole point of this is to copy the X spells as many times as possible using cards like the Twinning Staff and the enchantment that I had in there earlier. Oh, the Unbound Flourishing, yeah. Utilizing cards like the Power Conduit and the Chisei Heart of Oceans to repeat the first Tyrannic War's first chapter as many times as possible. Getting repeat value on drawing cards for creatures that have power 4 or greater. Protecting your counters with things like Ozolith. And just in general, trying to make sure that you put as many big creatures on the table as possible. Again, like I mentioned earlier, you do not have to pay too much into these because you're going to get copies of them. So dropping an Aberrant that has 6+1/+1 counters and getting a copy of it as opposed to maybe dumping into it to have a 12/12 isn't always a bad thing. But yeah, that is Magus Lucea Kane. X spells matter. Tyranids. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. Keep it positive. I'll remove negative comments. And that's it, guys. Until next time. Peace.